This all started when my mother and I moved into a new home. Well, not new, but new to us. Anyway, it wasn't that old, about 30 years old. This was back in 1987. We moved in with not a problem, but I started to notice things about this house. Things would go missing, only to be found days or months later in the same spot. I'd see darts of movement out of the corner of my eye, and when I was alone, it felt like I wasn't. I spent a lot of time alone in the house, which was fine, until dark came. Then the house would not feel so warm and inviting as it was in the day, but nothing ever came of it. Until many years later, when the footsteps started in the kitchen, they would come to the living room carpet and stop. As the time wore on, this came closer and closer, until one night, I was lying awake in bed, like most children do. They began to walk up my stairs to my room, and I know it wasn't my mom. I could hear her snoring downstairs. Now, don't say it was the house settling, because my stair made a very distinct squeak when someone walks up them. Anyway, once they reach the top of the stairs, I peek, being curious and all, and see a shadow standing at the door to my room. I froze, and a few seconds later, it turned around and it began its descent down the stairs. This happened once in a while, but only during stressful times in the house. The shadow itself looked like an average male, with nothing really standing out, but when he looked at me, it was a mixture of complete terror and a strange comfort, like he wasn't there to hurt me or scare me. Like I said, I see him once in a while checking on me, but eventually, he became a part of my life. The one that did scare me lived in the basement. Again, it was a man as far as I could tell. He was very angry, and his feeling was felt through the basement air. You could actually feel it as he walked into the basement, that this was just the beginning of him. Mostly, he would just sit in the corner and glare at you, as he did whatever you had to do, and he always kept as far away from you as possible. It's weird because you would see him move as you move, which was at the time very scary. Even though I was a very brave child, I rarely finished my choir there, even in the daytime. Eventually, my mom refused to go down there anymore, after she was tripped by something and fell and broke a couple of toes. As time went on and on, the basement became less and less used, to the point in which the activity was too much that we couldn't even handle it. We were even too scared to even use the laundry. But after a while, we forgot about the guests downstairs, until one night, when we heard a loud whoosh. We looked at each other in terror, as we knew something was wrong in the basement, and we would have to see what it was. So, we braved the basement to see a water pipe had broken, which in itself wasn't weird, but it was the fact that old cherished family photos and items that had previously been on a shelf across the basement were under this pipe that broke. My grandfather soon came over to help fix the pipe and clean up the inches of water. Everything was ruined. The drywall, the shelves, not to mention all the priceless family photos. When we finally cleaned out everything, the last thing to go was the aforementioned shelf, behind which we found a drawn chalk, a pentagram of sorts, and various other strange drawings in a large wooden Ouija board, which again was strange because my mom had never owned one in her entire life, and I was too young to even think about that stuff. Anyway, fast forward 12 years to 2002. My mom had met a great guy and had moved to another town to be with him, and I was moving out too, so I could live on my own. I was just staying in the house until my apartment was ready, which was 2 weeks away, and cleaning the house for the next owners. Our other housemate had stopped making his presence known many years ago, except for the glaring he did in the basement, and it was the furthest thing from my mind, and I was down to the last 3 boxes of stuff in the basement. In the basement there was 4 lights. Every time I came back for a box, one light was burnt out. As I went to get the last box, and I see I'm down to one last light, I know what's coming, but I need that box. So, I grabbed the box and stood up and looked in horror to see him standing in the darkness in his favorite spot. 2 things I noticed this time. He was huge, standing around 6'4", and something I never noticed before. He had red eyes, and it seemed like he had a nasty smile on his face, but I wasn't sure. I stared at him for what seemed like an eternity, but he did the strangest thing ever. He waved to me, but I didn't stick around to say my goodbyes, and somehow managed to shrink the run, yelling some very colorful language as I stumbled out the door. I jumped in my car and sped off, and I looked in the rearview mirror to see him standing in the kitchen, glaring out the window at me. Well, needless to say, I never went back. An interesting side note: the previous owners had been avoiding the Ouija board player and said that they knew of the entity I had spoke of. He only identified himself as Jay and never answered questions about who he was and what happened to him. They said he was fun to talk to until he moved in. Well, thanks for telling us now. This happened about 4 years ago, when I was 15. I was working at a farm in Connecticut at the time, and it was a habit for myself and my coworkers to have nighttime barbecues throughout the summer. On this particular occasion, we had killed 3 of the chickens we had and grilled them, nothing better than fresh chicken. As the night was winding down and we were getting ready to clean up, I noticed a very potent, sweet smell. To note, we were next to a sugar shack where maple syrup is made, and this smell was much stronger than the strongest syrup I've ever smelled. As I smelled it, I noticed my friend glance at me with a perplexed look on his face, and suddenly, a very thick fog drifted in. He got up quickly and declared, "We're leaving now." We of course left, leaving everything to be cleaned up the next day. We went into the farm office, and the fog was still there, along with the smell. It seemed to have followed us. I was a bit spooked, as I knew my friend was experiencing what I was, but the woman had no idea why we started acting strange, and was a bit confused at the sudden rush to leave. As we were leaving, it seemed as if the fog was thickening. However, when we reached the chain link fence, that is the border of the farm, the fog stopped abruptly. I looked out and saw that the fog followed the length of the fence, which was about 50 yards. We left and proceeded to the woman's house, and my friend told her to walk in her house backwards. My friend comes from Ghana in South America and is very superstitious. His grandfather had been a voodoo doctor of some sort. I heard numerous stories of him healing crazed people who talked in odd languages. Anyways, apparently, she did not walk in her house backwards, as we found out the next morning. However, when he told me to, when he dropped me off home, I did so, with no argument, knowing that sometimes you just don't ask why people tell you to do things. My friend picked me up for work the next morning, and I asked him, why did he even make me walk in backwards? He mentioned the smell in the fog, and said if it was a supernatural presence, it would not follow you into your house if you faced it, because it would think you knew it was there. We got to work, and the girl was there before us, and she looked very disheveled and tired. She immediately said she barely slept because things in her house kept falling and waking her up all night. She even said her door opened twice that night. She then said how it was odd how she had smelled something sweet and seen the fog, and then strange things happened to her. My friend and I had not said anything to her about the smell or the fog the previous night, or yet that morning, so we both looked at each other in amazement. She noticed and told us to tell her what happened to us, but instead of telling her that we had the same experience, my friend just asked her if she had walked in her house backwards. She said no. We can only guess why the strange happening went on in only her house and not ours. My name is Sherry, and I live in Loves Park, Illinois. Loves Park is located right outside of Rockport. Well, about 4 months ago, I moved into an apartment with my boyfriend, which is located off of Perry Road. There are the 3 of us who live there: Bill, my boyfriend, Adrian, his son, and myself. All of us have the same encounters with some kind of presence. Adrian is 15 years old and has called us hysterical by things he has witnessed while he was home by himself. Adrian's experience. One day, while home alone in the apartment, Adrian was on the computer. He said that Bill and my bedroom door opened and closed by itself. All windows and doors were closed at the time, so there was not a draft moving through the rooms. About a week later, he was home alone again. There was a knock on the door. Adrian went to the door, and no one was there. He has also seen gray blurs run from the bedrooms to the laundry room. Noises have also come from the kitchen while he was by himself. Bill and Adrian's experiences. In August of 2003, we had family over. While sitting there, Adrian and Bill were staring off towards the bedroom. All of a sudden, they both looked at each other and said, "Did you see that?" They claimed they saw what looked like an old man or woman, hunched over, running, and looking towards them into the laundry room. My experiences pretty much consisted of only hearing noises, like things in the kitchen opening and closing on their own, and blinds rustling with nobody around. That was until 2 nights ago. 2 nights ago, my mom and younger brother came over to visit. We played Uno and watched some TV. After they left, I got online and Adrian and Bill went outside and took the go-kart and mini bike for a ride to Rock Cut State Park. I was just sitting at the computer looking at items on eBay when I started to feel like I was being watched. I looked around and didn't see anything, but I was uncomfortable, so I went and got my cell phone out of my purse. By the way, they all left at around 12:30 a.m. Anyway, I walked back over to the computer and set the phone next to me. I continued my search on eBay when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I immediately looked over towards the hallway, and standing between the bedrooms and the laundry room, I saw a grayish figure of a man. A shiver of ultimate fear shot down the back of my neck. I've never been that frightened in my entire life. He stood there for about 2 seconds and then disappeared into the laundry room. I grabbed my phone and bolted out the front door. I tried to call Bill on his phone, but he didn't answer. I remained on the front porch until he called me and said he was on his way home. When they got home, I told them what happened, and they said, "Now do you believe us?" I always believed, in a way, but now that I actually saw this thing, I know it's real, and it still frightens me. The ghost, however, has not harmed us in any way. He's just sharing our residence. I'm not sure exactly where to start. All my life, I had feelings and happenings around me. Some I remember, and some are still a bit hazy to me. I have a couple of true stories that have happened to me that I would like to share with everyone. I grew up in a small city in California called Pico Rivera, but moved in '92 to Colorado. Growing up in Cali, I've had 3 sisters and my mom and dad. The house we lived at was on Maris Avenue, and from what I was told, it was originally the first church in Pico Rivera, but was torn down to make a home for an elderly couple who, I believe, the husband died of old age. Their house was torn down and ours was built. I was 8, I believe, when I really started to understand what I was experiencing. I remember that I would always see horrid faces on the wood paneling in the house. By that I mean on the doors and the kitchen cupboards. I remember that my older sister and I would be the only ones to experience all the happenings. Her and I would have recurring nightmares. I would dream of trying to run away from what I believed to be the devil chasing me, but the more I ran, the closer he would get. My sister would dream of a young girl in a checkered red and white dress trying to kill her. Every night, I would hear the same things, stomping on a roof or a stampede of running feet right above my head, and just as fast as it would start, it would disappear. One day, I was alone in the house. My parents and sister had gone to the store, and my 2 older sisters were at work. I was peacefully watching TV and playing with our cat Midnight when a feeling of being watched came over me. Thinking absolutely nothing of it, I went on watching TV, but noticed that Midnight had run off somewhere. I thought it was odd that she had just run off, but I still didn't care. I just kept on watching my cartoons. My mom has a habit of putting this plastic rug thing on our carpets to keep the dirt off, and we had one, so if someone was walking on it, you could hear them. So, What I started to hear was what I thought the cat running back and forth, so I yelled out her name to get her kitty butt over to me and stop making all that noise. When I heard her meow from behind the sofa, I found this strange, wondering how she did that so fast, so I went behind the sofa to take a look. Sure enough, she was huddled in the corner, hissing and meowing with her eyes wide open. I of course tried to get her out, but she wouldn't even let me get near her. I left her alone and figured that she would come out when she's good and ready, and went back to my TV. Then, all of a sudden, I heard the noise in the hall again. I put my TV on mute, thinking that maybe it was the cartoon I was watching, and the noise stopped for a second, but then went back right to it. I started to listen really carefully, and what it sounded like was footsteps, heavy footsteps. With this, I decided to do the same my cat was doing, so I hid in a little tiny opening that was behind her sofa, and I listened very carefully. Then I noticed that whatever it was making, that noise stopped, as if it knew that I was aware it was there. I could feel my heart beat in my throat, and then it started up again, but this time it was faster, and then the doors and windows were opening and slamming shut. I really did not know what to do. I just remembered that I was concentrating on how close the passes were, and they were coming closer to me with every beat of my heart, until I couldn't hear it on the plastic anymore. My cat took off from behind the sofa, so I took it as a sign, and did the same thing, and ran out my front door screaming, thinking that whatever it was would grab me from behind. I made it safely outside my home, and I sat on the sidewalk, waiting for someone to come home. I felt something burning a hole in the back of my neck, and when I turned back to my house, the front door slammed shut. Finally, my parents came home, and I was so happy to see them. My mom scolded me for being outside alone, and so I proceeded to tell them what had happened. My dad said that it was probably an aftershock or a small earthquake, but none of the neighbors experienced anything. My mom, on the other hand, said that I was being punished for being a naughty kid. A few days later, my older sister had come home from work to an empty house, and she experienced the same thing. Our home out here in Colorado has a strange feeling to it. I can't describe it. It's just something that always has been there. I remember one night, it was myself, my neighbor, and my twin sister were home alone. My parents had gone up to the hill for some gambling, so we decided to watch movies and just be the normal teenage kids. Well, my sister had gone in the shower, and my neighbor and I were just sitting around gossiping, waiting for my sister to get out so we could watch a movie, when the phone rang. Of course, I ran to pick it up, and I said hello, but the other side was dead. So, I put it back down and went back to our business. When it rang again, I got up, ran to the phone. Again, no one on the other end. I hate prank calls, and two is enough to get me agitated with, so I unplugged all the phones in the house and left it at that. About 5 minutes later, there was a knock at our door. Now, I wasn't a stupid girl. I looked out the peephole, and there was no one there, so I looked out my window, and there wasn't even any footprint in the snow coming up to our door. Well, we both found this to be strange, and the feeling a bit uncomfortable. We went around the house, making sure everything was locked, and covered all our windows. We stood looking out the front window, making sure it wasn't one of our neighbors trying to play games, when my sister came out of the shower and had a confused look on her face. We asked her what was wrong, and she asked us if we had gone into the bathroom during the time she was in the shower. I told her no, there's no way for us to even get in if we wanted to, because there's no key for that lock. Again, we asked her what was wrong, and she proceeded to tell us that before she got in the water, she took off her rings and had placed them on top of the toilet seat cover so they wouldn't fall into the sink, but when she had gone out, they were on top of the toilet and the seat cover was up as if someone had removed them to use the restroom. At the same time, both the phone rang and there was another knock at the door. We looked out the peephole while my sister ran to the phone. Again, there were no footprints in the fresh snow and no one at the door. My sister came running and said that it was for me, So I started walking to the phone when I remembered that I unplugged all the phones. So I told my sister to hang it up. She said that it sounded important, but I told her to hang it up. Finally, she did. My neighbor and I both turned white, and my sister asked what was going on when I told her I unplugged them, so there is no way they could have rang, let alone anyone talk on the other end. We still talk about this to this day, and even in my own apartment, I wake up to hear my toilet flush on its own, or things vanish, and I find them in my cupboards. Crazy, crazy. Hey guys, it's PhantomOfDarkness here, and I know you guys usually get the crazy outros, the silly outros and stuff like that, but I just wanted to say that I feel so bad right now because unfortunately there was someone who passed away who was a dear subscriber to me. She was so devoted to my channel and probably as passionate as I am about this channel myself, and it's just a shame to see someone go too soon. And Pumpkin Joanne was, a great subscriber of mine, and her daughter Springtrap, they first were introduced to my channel. I think Springtrap actually introduced her mother, Pumpkin Joanne, to my channel. So I think this is incredible tragedy, and I feel so bad. But guys, we're gonna continue this. This is dedicated to our memory, and I hope you guys, have a good day. Sorry to end this on a horrible note, but there's gonna be one less comment, one less interaction with you guys, which if anybody, were to pass away from my channel, it would be devastating. But, the fact that, I get one less subscriber who just won't watch my channel anymore just really pains me. And like I said, you guys know how much I love interacting with you guys, and, to see like just an empty space where a comment section would be, where someone could have wrote, and that belongs to her. Just, it's terrible. It's terrible, guys. Pumpkin Joanne, if you're watching this video, I hope you enjoy it. I worked really hard on this, and like I said, it's dedicated to you and for everybody on the channel. This is something special that you can take with you to get away from the reality, the horrible stuff that happens. I ask that you guys please pray for Springtrap, even if you're not a prayer at all. Just wish her the best in life. And, Pumpkin Joanne, like I said, you're going to enjoy this video. I know you will. But guys, really, I love you. Good night, good morning, and I'll see you in the next video.